The smell of fresh coffee and bacon filled the air at Murphy's family diner as the afternoon crowd began to thin out. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's usual order, where the red vinyl booths had seen decades of first dates, family celebrations, and quiet conversations over pie. The black and white checkered floor showed its age, but the warmth of the place never faded. In the corner booth by the large window, 20-year-old Luna sat with a bright smile on her face, carefully cutting her chocolate chip pancakes into perfect squares. This was her favorite spot in the whole world. Every Friday after her shift at the town library, she treated herself to the same meal, always ordered the same way. The pancakes had to have exactly 3 chocolate chips in each bite, and the syrup needed to form neat little pools in each square. Luna had Down syndrome, but to her that was just part of who she was, like having brown hair or loving pancakes. She saw the world through eyes that found joy in the smallest things. The way the afternoon sun streamed through the window made her happy. The cheerful ding of the bell above the diner door made her smile. Even the busy sounds from the kitchen felt like music to her. She checked the old watch on her wrist, a gift from her older brother Owen. He would be here soon to pick her up, probably running late from his construction job as usual. Luna didn't mind waiting. She had her pancakes, her favorite booth, and she could watch people walk by on Main Street. The peaceful afternoon took a turn when 3 teenage boys burst through the front door, their loud voices cutting through the gentle hum of conversation. Tyler, the tallest of the group, strutted in like he owned the place. His expensive sneakers squeaked against the floor as he surveyed the diner, with the kind of confidence that came from never facing real consequences. Behind him, Chase and Derek followed like shadows, always ready to laugh at whatever Tyler found funny. These weren't just any teenagers. They were seniors at the local high school, the kind who thought their status made them untouchable. Tyler's father owned the biggest car dealership in 3 counties. Chase's mother sat on the school board and half the town council committees. Derek might not have had the same family connections, but he made up for it by being the meanest of the 3. The boys slid into a booth 3 tables away from Luna, but their voices carried easily across the small diner. They ordered milkshakes and fries, speaking rudely to Jenny, the teenage waitress who was working her way through community college. Jenny kept her head down and tried to stay professional, but anyone could see she was uncomfortable. Luna tried to focus on her pancakes, but the boys were getting louder. They started making jokes about other customers, pointing and laughing at an elderly man who was having trouble reading the menu, mocking a woman who was struggling to keep her toddler quiet. Their behavior made Luna's stomach feel funny, not in a good way. Then Tyler noticed her. "Hey, look at that girl over there," he said, not bothering to lower his voice. "The one by the window." Luna felt their eyes on her and looked up briefly. She gave them a small, friendly wave, the way her mother had taught her to acknowledge people. It was a gesture of pure kindness, something that came naturally to her. The boys started whispering and snickering. Luna couldn't hear exactly what they were saying, but she could feel the meanness in their voices. Her hand started to shake a little as she tried to cut another piece of pancake. "She's weird," Derek said loud enough for half the diner to hear. "Why does she keep cutting her food like that?" "Maybe something's wrong with her," Chase added, his voice dripping with fake concern that fooled no one. Luna's face flushed red. She knew they were talking about her, but she didn't understand why. She was just eating her pancakes the way she always did, the way that felt right to her. Other customers started noticing the boys' behavior. An older couple in the next booth shot disapproving looks their way. A businessman at the counter shook his head but went back to his newspaper. Everyone seemed to hope someone else would handle the situation. Jenny, the young waitress, approached their table with their milkshakes, her hands visibly trembling. She set the glasses down carefully, trying not to make eye contact. "There you go," she said quietly. "Thanks, sweetheart," Tyler said with a smirk that made Jenny's skin crawl. "Hey, what's the deal with the girl in the corner? She seems different." Jenny's face went pale. "She's a regular customer. She's really nice. Please just leave her alone." The boys exchanged looks, their grins getting wider. There was something about Jenny's protective tone that made their cruel instincts kick in even stronger. Tyler stood up from his booth and walked over to Luna's table. His friends followed, forming a small crowd around her corner spot. Luna looked up at them with confusion in her eyes, still holding her plastic fork with a piece of pancake on it. "Hi there," Tyler said in a voice that sounded friendly, but felt cold. "We were just wondering what makes you so special that you get to sit in the best booth in the place." Luna blinked, not understanding the meanness hidden in his words. "I like this booth," she said simply. "The sun comes through the window and I can see the street." The boys laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laughter that came from joy. It was sharp and cutting. "Oh, you like the sun," Chase mocked, using a baby voice. "How nice for you." Luna's smile faded. She was starting to understand that these boys weren't being friendly. The feeling in her stomach got worse. "Please leave me alone," she said quietly, looking down at her half-eaten pancakes. "I'm just waiting for my brother." "Aw, she's waiting for her brother," Derek said in that same mocking tone. "That's so cute." The situation was escalating, and everyone in the diner could feel it. The businessman at the counter glanced over nervously. The elderly couple whispered to each other about whether they should intervene. Jenny stood frozen by the coffee machine, wanting to help but not knowing how. Luna's voice got a little stronger. "My mom taught me to ask nicely first. Please stop being mean and go away." Her simple directness caught Tyler off guard for a moment. He wasn't used to anyone, especially someone he saw as vulnerable, standing up to him. His face darkened with anger. "Listen here," he said, leaning closer to her table. "Nobody tells me what to do." The confrontation reached its terrible peak when Tyler, frustrated by Luna's unexpected courage and embarrassed by her gentle defiance in front of his friends, lost control completely. His hand moved faster than anyone could react. The sound of the slap echoed through the suddenly silent diner like a gunshot. Luna's hand went to her cheek, her eyes wide with shock and pain. Tears started flowing immediately, not just from the physical sting, but from the complete bewilderment of why someone would want to hurt her. The three boys stood there for a moment. Even they seemed surprised by what had just happened. Then Tyler straightened up, trying to look tough in front of his friends. "Come on," he said to Chase and Derek. "Let's get out of here." They threw some money on their table and walked out, Tyler calling back, "Maybe next time you'll know your place." The bell above the door chimed their exit, leaving Luna sitting alone, crying softly into her hands, her pancakes growing cold on the table. Outside Murphy's diner, sitting in his weathered black pickup truck, Jake Morrison ended his phone call with a heavy sigh. At 58 years old, he carried himself with the kind of quiet strength that came from surviving things most people never had to face. His gray beard was neatly trimmed, and his leather jacket bore patches that told the story of his life. A Purple Heart from Vietnam, the Road Guardians Motorcycle Club logo, and a small ribbon for autism awareness. Jake had been taking a call from his ex-wife about their daughter Melody's upcoming birthday. Melody was 25 now, living in a group home 2 towns over, and she had autism. Every conversation about her filled Jake with both pride and protective worry. She was doing well, working at a grocery store and learning to live independently, but Jake never stopped thinking about all the people in the world who might try to hurt her simply because she was different. He was about to start his truck and head home when movement in the diner's large front window caught his attention. Through the glass, he could see 3 teenage boys surrounding a young woman in the corner booth. Something about their body language made Jake pause. He'd seen that same predatory stance before, in darker places during darker times. Jake rolled down his window to get a better view. The girl looked young, maybe in her 20s, with the kind of gentle features that reminded him immediately of his daughter. She was alone, sitting with a plate of food, and the 3 boys were clearly bothering her. His hands tightened on the steering wheel as he watched the situation unfold. The boys were laughing, but it wasn't friendly laughter. The girl was shrinking back in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. Jake could see other people in the diner looking over, but nobody was stepping in to help. "Come on," he muttered under his breath, watching the other customers. Somebody do something. But nobody did. Jake's military training had taught him to observe before acting, to gather information before making a move. But his father's heart was telling him something different. This girl reminded him so much of Melody that his chest began to ache. Then he saw the girl's lips move. She was saying something to the boys, probably asking them to leave her alone. Jake knew that look on her face, that combination of confusion and growing fear. He'd seen it on Melody's face too many times when she didn't understand why people were being cruel to her. The tallest boy leaned closer to the girl's table. Jake could see his face clearly now through the window, could see the anger and meanness written all over it. The boy's friends were encouraging him, feeding off each other's cruelty like a pack of wolves. Jake reached for his door handle but stopped when he saw the girl straighten up a little. She was speaking again, and this time her voice seemed stronger. Even through the glass, Jake could see she was trying to stand up for herself. "That's it, honey," Jake whispered. "You tell them." But instead of backing down, the boys seemed to get angrier. The tall one's face darkened, and Jake knew what was coming before it happened. He'd seen that expression before, on the faces of bullies and cowards who couldn't handle being challenged by someone they thought was weak. The slap rang out so loud that Jake heard it through his closed window. Time seemed to slow down as Jake watched the girl's head snap to the side, her hand flying to her cheek. He saw the shock in her eyes, the tears that started immediately. He saw the three boys standing there, probably surprised by their own cruelty, before the tall one tried to salvage his tough guy image with some parting words. Jake was out of his truck and moving toward the diner before the boys had even reached the door. His combat boots hit the pavement with purpose, and his whole body radiated the kind of controlled fury that came from years of learning when and how to fight. The three boys burst out of the diner just as Jake reached the entrance. They were laughing and high-fiving each other, completely oblivious to the fact that their actions had been witnessed. Jake stepped aside to let them pass, memorizing their faces, their voices, the way they moved. The tall one was clearly the leader. The other two followed his lead but seemed less sure of themselves now that they were outside. "Did you see her face?" one of them was saying as they walked toward a shiny red sports car in the parking lot. "She totally thought she was tough," the leader replied. "Had to show her what's what." Jake watched them drive away, noting the license plate number and the fact that the car was expensive and new. These weren't kids from the poor part of town. These were privileged boys who had probably never faced real consequences for their actions. He pushed through the diner door, the bell above chiming his entrance. The atmosphere inside was thick with tension and uncomfortable silence. Every customer was trying to pretend they hadn't just witnessed something terrible, going back to their meals and conversations with forced normalcy. Jake's eyes went straight to the corner booth where the young woman sat alone, crying quietly into her hands. Her plate of pancakes sat half-eaten in front of her, the syrup probably cold by now. She looked so small and vulnerable sitting there that Jake felt his heart break a little. He approached her table slowly, not wanting to frighten her any more than she already was. When he reached her booth, he slid into the seat across from her as gently as his large frame would allow. "Hey there," he said in the softest voice he could manage. "Are you okay?" Luna looked up at him through her tears, taking in his leather jacket, his gray beard, his kind eyes. Most people might have been scared of Jake at first glance. He was a big man with tattoos and the rough look of someone who'd lived a hard life, but Luna had always been good at seeing past appearances to the person underneath. "That boy hit me," she said simply, her voice still shaking. "I don't know why. I was just eating my pancakes." Jake felt his jaw clench, but he kept his voice gentle. "I know, honey. I saw what happened. Are you hurt?" Luna touched her cheek where a red mark was already forming. "It stings. But mostly it made me sad. I don't understand why people want to be mean." The honesty in her words hit Jake harder than any punch ever had. This was exactly the kind of thing he worried about happening to Melody. The world could be cruel to people like them, people who approached life with open hearts and couldn't understand why anyone would want to hurt them. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Jake asked, pulling some napkins from the dispenser and offering them to her. "Luna," she said, taking the napkins and dabbing at her eyes. "I work at the library downtown. I was waiting for my brother Owen to pick me up." "That's a beautiful name," Jake said. "I'm Jake. I have a daughter who's a lot like you. Her name is Melody." Something in Jake's voice made Luna feel safer. She stopped crying and really looked at him for the first time. "Does your daughter like pancakes too?" Jake smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in hours. "She loves them, especially with chocolate chips just like yours." "These are my favorite," Luna said, looking down at her cold pancakes. "I come here every Friday after work. Jenny, the waitress, is really nice to me." As if summoned by her name, Jenny appeared at their table, her face red with embarrassment and anger. "Luna, I am so sorry about what happened. I should have done something, but I didn't know how to stop them. Are you okay?" "I'm okay," Luna said, though she was clearly still shaken. "This is Jake. He's being nice to me." Jenny looked at Jake with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. She'd seen him around town before. Knew he was part of the motorcycle club that sometimes stopped at the diner. "Thank you for helping her," she said quietly. "Those boys," Jake said, his voice carefully controlled. "Are they regulars here?" Jenny nodded reluctantly. "They come in sometimes, usually on Friday nights with their friends. They're seniors at the high school. The tall one's name is Tyler. His dad owns Morrison Automotive downtown." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Morrison? Any relation to me?" "Oh no," Jenny said quickly. "Different family entirely. His dad is Richard Morrison. He owns the big car dealership on Route 9. Jake filed that information away. "What about the other two?" "Chase and Derek," Jenny said, glancing around to make sure they weren't overheard. "Chase's mom is on the school board. Derek, he's just mean. They've caused problems before, but nobody ever does anything about it." Luna was listening to their conversation with growing understanding. "They were mean to you too, weren't they, Jenny?" Jenny's face flushed again. "It's okay, Luna, don't worry about me." But Jake was worrying about all of it. He was thinking about his daughter Melody, about Luna, about every vulnerable person who had to navigate a world full of people like Tyler, Chase, and Derek. He was thinking about the other customers who had sat by and watched, and the system that apparently protected these boys from consequences. "Luna," he said gently, "do you have a way to contact your brother? I'd like to wait here with you until he arrives." Luna nodded and pulled an old flip phone from her purse. "Owen gave me this for emergencies. He should be here soon anyway." While Luna called her brother, Jake's mind was already working. He was thinking about security cameras, about witness statements, about the kind of justice that sometimes had to happen outside the courthouse. He was thinking about his brothers and the road guardians, and how they felt about people who hurt the innocent. Most of all, he was thinking about making sure this never happened to Luna, or anyone like her, ever again. The Road Guardians clubhouse sat on the outskirts of town, a modest building that had once been an auto repair shop. From the outside, it looked rough around the edges with its weathered siding and collection of motorcycles parked out front, but inside it felt like a family gathering place. The walls were covered with photos of charity rides, fundraising events, and brotherhood moments that spanned decades. Jake pushed through the front door that evening, still carrying the weight of what he'd witnessed at Murphy's diner. The familiar sounds of pool balls clicking and classic rock, playing softly in the background, usually helped him relax after a long day. Tonight was different. "Jake, about time you showed up," called out Bones, the club's president. At 62, Bones was the oldest member of the Road Guardians, a former Marine who'd earned his nickname not from anything sinister, but from his love of archaeology. During the week, he worked at the local community college teaching history. His gray ponytail and reading glasses gave him the look of a professor who happened to ride a Harley. Around the room, 8 other members of the Road Guardians were scattered at various tables. These weren't the stereotypical bikers that movies portrayed. There was Rick, a firefighter who spent his weekends volunteering at the animal shelter. Tommy worked as a nurse at the children's hospital and had 3 kids of his own. Bull was a retired police officer who now ran a small hardware store downtown. Jake nodded to his brothers but didn't return their usual cheerful greetings. Something in his expression made the room gradually quiet down. "We need to talk," Jake said, his voice carrying the weight of serious business. Bones set down his beer and gestured to the large round table in the center of the room. "Sounds important. Everyone gather up." The 9 men settled around the table, their attention focused completely on Jake. This was how the Road Guardians worked. When one of their brothers had something serious to discuss, everything else stopped. Jake told them about Luna, describing the scene at the diner in detail. He talked about her innocence, her confusion, the way she'd tried to stand up for herself before being struck down by someone twice her size. He mentioned his daughter Melody, and how watching Luna get hurt had felt like watching his own child suffer. The room grew quieter with each detail. These were men who'd all seen their share of violence and cruelty, but there was something about targeting someone vulnerable that hit them differently. Rick's jaw clenched as he thought about his own patients at the children's hospital. Bull remembered all the domestic violence calls he'd responded to as a cop. Tommy thought about his kids and how he'd feel if someone hurt them just for being different. "You got names?" Bones asked when Jake finished his story. Tyler Morrison, Chase Peterson, and Derek Walsh, Jake said. All seniors at the high school. Tyler's dad owns the big car dealership on Route 9. Chase's mother is Linda Peterson, sits on the school board. Bull leaned back in his chair. I know Linda Peterson. Real piece of work. Thinks her family is better than everyone else in town. Always complaining about something at the city council meetings. What about Morrison? Asked Rick. Different Morrison family than me, Jake clarified. Richard Morrison owns Morrison Automotive. Big shot businessman. Drives a fancy BMW, always talking about his success. Bones was quiet for a moment, thinking. As the club president, he took these matters seriously. The Road Guardians had a reputation in town, and he worked hard to make sure it was the right kind of reputation. This isn't about revenge, he said finally. This is about making sure it doesn't happen again. But we need to know what we're dealing with first. Anyone got connections at the high school? Tommy raised his hand. My wife teaches there. Middle school, but she knows people in the high school. She might be able to tell us about these kids. I've got a cousin who works in the sheriff's department, added Bull. Might be able to find out if these boys have been in trouble before. Bones nodded. Good. Jake, you said there were other people in the diner when this happened? Yeah, but nobody did anything. There was an older couple, a businessman reading his paper, and Jenny, the waitress. She wanted to help but didn't know how. Jenny's a good kid, said Rick. She's been working there since she was 16 trying to save money for college. I've seen her handle difficult customers before, but 3 teenage boys against 1 girl? That's not a fair fight. Over the next hour, the Road Guardians developed a plan. It wasn't about confrontation or intimidation. It was about information gathering and understanding exactly what they were dealing with. These men had learned through experience that knowing your enemy was half the battle. Bull would reach out to his cousin at the sheriff's department to see if Tyler, Chase, or Derek had any history with law enforcement. Tommy would talk to his wife about the boys' reputation at school. Rick would visit with Jenny at the diner to get more details about what had happened and whether she'd seen anything like this before. Jake would return to Murphy's diner to speak with the manager about security camera footage and to check in on Luna. What? About talking to their parents? Asked one of the younger members. Bones shook his head. Not yet. We need to understand the whole picture first. If these kids are getting away with behavior like this, there's probably a reason. Could be their parents don't know. Could be their parents don't care. Or could be their parents are part of the problem. The meeting continued as each member shared what they knew about the families involved. The picture that emerged wasn't pretty. The Morrison, Peterson, and Walsh families all had money and influence in the small town. They were the kind of people who got their way through connections and intimidation. 2 days later, the Road Guardians reconvened. The information they'd gathered painted a disturbing picture. Bull's cousin at the sheriff's department had been reluctant to share details, but eventually revealed that Derek Walsh had been brought in twice for fighting at school. But the charges had been dropped both times. Tyler Morrison had been caught vandalizing a rival school's property, but his father had quietly paid for the damages and the incident had been swept under the rug. Tommy's wife had even more troubling news. She says these 3 are known bullies, Tommy reported. They target kids who are different or can't fight back. Luna isn't their first victim. The room erupted in angry murmurs. There was a kid with a stutter last year, Tommy continued. They made his life hell until his family finally moved him to a different school. And a girl who was overweight got tormented so badly she ended up in therapy. Rick had learned from Jenny that the boys' behavior at the diner had been escalating for months. Jenny says they come in and harass customers all the time. Last month they made an elderly man cry by mocking his shaky hands. The week before that, they were cruel to a woman who had trouble speaking English. Jake felt his anger building, but it was the controlled anger of a man who'd learned to channel his emotions into action. So this has been going on for a while and nobody's done anything about it. The school won't act because of who their parents are, Tommy said. The police won't act because technically they're minors and the families have lawyers. And regular people are too scared to get involved. Bones stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the motorcycles parked in the lot. Each bike represented a man who'd chosen to be part of something bigger than himself, part of a brotherhood that stood up for what was right. Well, he said finally, turning back to face his brothers, looks like it's time someone did get involved. The Road Guardians spent the rest of the evening planning their next move. It wouldn't be violent and it wouldn't be illegal. but it would be memorable, and it would make sure that Luna and others like her would never have to face this kind of cruelty alone again. Friday night at Murphy's Diner was usually busy, but tonight felt different. The regular customers seemed to sense something in the air, though they couldn't quite put their finger on what it was. Jenny wiped down tables with more energy than usual, glancing repeatedly toward the parking lot through the large front windows. She knew the road guardians were coming. Jake had called ahead to let her know, not wanting to surprise her or scare any of the other customers. He'd been careful to explain that this wouldn't be about violence or intimidation. It was about justice, and sometimes justice required a different kind of conversation than what happened in courtrooms or school principals' offices. At exactly 7:30, the sound of motorcycle engines filled the evening air. One by one, 12 Harley-Davidsons pulled into the diner's parking lot, their chrome gleaming under the streetlights. The riders dismounted in silence, removing their helmets and adjusting their leather jackets with the practiced ease of men who'd done this dance many times before. But tonight was different from their usual charity rides or social gatherings. Tonight they had business to handle. Bones led the group toward the diner entrance, his gray ponytail tucked neatly into his jacket. Behind him, Jake, Bull, Rick, Tommy, and the rest of the road guardians walked with quiet purpose. These weren't men looking for trouble. These were men who'd found trouble and decided to handle it the right way. The bell above the door chimed as they entered, and the diner gradually fell silent. Conversation stopped mid-sentence as 12 leather-clad bikers filed in and took seats at various tables throughout the restaurant. They ordered coffee, pie, and burgers as if this were just another Friday night dinner. Jenny approached their tables with slightly shaking hands, though she tried to hide her nervousness. These men had become allies in her mind, but seeing them all together was still intimidating. "Everything okay tonight, Jenny?" Jake asked quietly as she poured his coffee. "They're not here yet," she whispered back, "but they usually show up around 8. Jake nodded and checked his watch. The timing had to be perfect. Too early, and the boys might not show up. Too late, and they might leave before the conversation could happen. The road guardians settled into their meals, making casual conversation about work, family, and upcoming charity events. To any observer, they looked like a group of friends enjoying dinner together. But each man was positioned strategically throughout the diner, ready for what was to come. At 10 minutes past 8, Tyler's red sports car pulled into the parking lot. Jenny caught Jake's eye and gave a small nod. He subtly signaled to Bones, who passed the message to the other members. Every road guardian in the diner knew it was time. Tyler, Chase, and Derek strutted through the front door with their usual arrogance, laughing loudly about something that had happened at school. They were dressed in expensive clothes and carrying themselves like they owned the world. Their laughter died when they noticed the bikers. 12 pairs of eyes turned toward them as they stood in the doorway. Not threatening stares, not angry glares, just the steady, measuring gaze of men who'd seen everything life had to offer and weren't easily impressed. Tyler recovered first, puffing out his chest and trying to look tough. "Looks like the circus is in town," he said loudly, earning nervous chuckles from his friends. The bikers didn't react. They just watched. The 3 boys made their way to their usual booth, but their swagger was gone. Being outnumbered 12-3 had a way of changing the atmosphere, even for cocky teenagers who thought they were untouchable. Jake waited until they'd ordered their food before making his move. He stood up slowly from his table, picked up a manila folder he'd placed beside his plate, and walked over to their booth. "Evening, boys," he said in a calm, conversational tone as he slid into the seat across from them. "Mind if we have a chat?" Tyler tried to maintain his tough guy attitude. "Actually, we do mind, old man. This is a private conversation." Jake smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. Funny thing about private conversations in public places. Sometimes other people can hear them. Sometimes other people can even see them. He opened the manila folder and pulled out several printed photographs, security camera screenshots from the diner's surveillance system, showing clear images of Tyler slapping Luna, while Chase and Derek stood by laughing. The boys' faces went pale as they stared at the photos. "Nice and clear, don't you think?" Jake continued conversationally. "Technology these days is amazing. High-definition cameras, multiple angles, perfect lighting." Chase found his voice first. "How did you get those?" Let's just say the manager of this establishment was very cooperative when he learned what had happened to one of his regular customers, Jake replied. Turns out Luna has been coming here every Friday for 3 years. Everyone who works here loves her. They were pretty upset when they heard about your little performance. Derek was squirming in his seat. Look, man, it was just a joke. We didn't mean anything by it, Jake's expression hardened. A joke? You think hitting a disabled girl is funny? By now, the other road guardians had quietly moved closer, not surrounding the booth in a threatening way, but making their presence felt. Bones stood near the counter chatting with Jenny. Bull sat at the next table over reading a newspaper. Rick and Tommy had moved to a booth behind the boys, discussing motorcycle maintenance in low voices. Tyler looked around nervously, finally realizing that they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. What do you want? Jake pulled out more papers from his folder. These are witness statements from other customers who were here that day. This one's from Mrs. Henderson, the elderly lady who was sitting in booth 3. She got a real clear view of everything. He set down another paper. This one's from Mr. Rodriguez, who was sitting at the counter. He's offered to testify in court if necessary. The color drained completely from Tyler's face. Testify, court? What are you talking about? Assault on a disabled person, Jake explained calmly. That's a felony in this state, especially when there's video evidence and multiple witnesses. You're all 18, right? That means you'd be tried as adults. Chase was starting to panic. My mom's on the school board. She'll fix this. Bones chose that moment to join the conversation, pulling up a chair to the end of the booth. Your mom, Linda Peterson, nice lady. We went to high school together, actually. She probably doesn't know about your extracurricular activities, does she, son? The weight of their situation was finally sinking in for all 3 boys. They weren't dealing with other teenagers or school officials who could be intimidated or bribed. These were grown men with evidence, connections, and the patience to see justice done properly. What do you want from us? Tyler asked again, his voice much smaller than before. Jake leaned forward slightly. Here's what's going to happen. You have 2 choices. Choice 1. We take all this evidence to the district attorney's office on Monday morning. Video footage, witness statements, the whole package. You get arrested, charged with felony assault, and you spend the next few years learning about consequences in a much less comfortable place than this diner. The boys stared at him in horror. What's choice 2? Derek whispered. Jake smiled, and this time it was almost friendly. Choice 2 is more interesting. You 3 are going to make some changes in your lives. Real changes. You're going to learn what it means to be decent human beings, and you're going to make amends for the pain you've caused. What kind of amends? Chase asked. We'll get to the details, Jake said. But let's just say you're going to spend a lot more time helping people instead of hurting them. And if you ever, and I mean ever, target someone vulnerable again, choice 1 becomes the only option. Are we clear? The 3 boys looked at each other, then back at the 12 bikers who filled the diner. For the first time in their lives, they were facing real consequences for their actions. For the first time, their parents' money and influence couldn't protect them. We understand, Tyler said quietly. Jake nodded and closed the folder. Good. We'll be in touch about the details. Enjoy your meal, boys. And remember, we'll be watching. The road guardians filed out of the diner as quietly as they'd arrived, leaving Tyler, Chase, and Derek sitting in stunned silence, finally understanding that their days of unopposed cruelty were over. 3 weeks had passed since the confrontation at Murphy's diner, and the changes in Tyler Morrison's life were so dramatic that he sometimes didn't recognize himself. Every morning at 8, he arrived at the Sunshine Community Center on the outskirts of town, a place he'd never even noticed before despite driving past it hundreds of times. The community center served adults with developmental disabilities, providing job training, social activities, and daily support. Tyler's job was simple but important. He helped clients with basic tasks, assisted during art therapy sessions, and cleaned up after meals. The pay was minimum wage, but that wasn't the point anymore. On this particular Monday morning, Tyler was helping David, a 30-year-old man with Down syndrome, organize craft supplies in the art room. David had become Tyler's favorite person at the center, though Tyler would have been embarrassed to admit that 3 weeks ago, he wouldn't have been able to see past David's disability. Tyler, do you think Luna will come visit us again soon? David asked as he carefully sorted colored pencils into containers. Tyler smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. I hope so, David. She said she might come back next week to help with the reading group. Luna had first visited the community center 2 weeks earlier, brought by Jake Morrison, who thought she might enjoy meeting other people like herself. She'd taken one look at Tyler working patiently with David and had been shocked into silence. The boy who had struck her was now gently helping someone tie their shoes, his voice kind and encouraging. Tyler had seen her standing in the doorway and had frozen, unsure of what to say or do. All the apologies he'd practiced in his head suddenly seemed inadequate, but Luna, being Luna, had simply walked over and said, "Hi, Tyler. Are you learning to be nice now?" The simplicity of her question had broken something inside Tyler's chest. "I'm trying to," he'd answered honestly. "Good," Luna had said. "Being nice feels better than being mean." Now 2 weeks later, Luna came to the center regularly, not because she had to, but because she'd made friends there. She read books to the clients, helped serve lunch, and treated everyone with the same gentle kindness that made her special. Across town at the public library, Chase Peterson was discovering his own path to redemption. Every afternoon after school, he worked in the accessibility department that Luna had helped create. His job was to convert books to large print, organize audiobooks, and help patrons who had trouble using the regular computer systems. Mrs. Chen, the head librarian, had been skeptical when Jake Morrison first brought Chase in. She knew Luna well and had heard about what happened at the diner, but Jake had convinced her to give the boy a chance, and slowly, Chase had proven himself. "Chase, could you help Mrs. Rodriguez with the new talking book player?" Mrs. Chen called out from her desk. Chase looked up from the Braille books he was organizing and nodded. Mrs. Rodriguez was elderly and nearly blind, and she'd been frustrated trying to learn the new technology. 3 weeks ago, Chase would have found her struggles amusing. Now he pulled up a chair beside her and patiently walked through each step of operating the device. "You're so patient with me, young man," Mrs. Rodriguez said as the audiobook finally started playing. Not many teenagers would take the time. Chase felt a warmth in his chest that was completely new to him. "It's no problem, Mrs. Rodriguez. I'm here every day if you need help." Luna appeared at his shoulder, having quietly approached while he worked. "Hi, Chase. You're getting really good at helping people." Chase turned to face her, still amazed that she could speak to him without anger or fear. "Hi, Luna. How was your day?" "Good. I taught David how to make friendship bracelets at the community center. He wants to make one for you." The idea that someone wanted to make him a gift, especially someone from the community center, made Chase's eyes water a little. 6 months ago, he would have mocked the very idea. Now it felt like the greatest honor he could receive. Derek Walsh's transformation had been perhaps the most dramatic of the three. His community service took place at the youth center downtown, where he worked with Jake's guidance as a mentor for younger kids who were showing signs of becoming bullies themselves. "Derek, we've got a situation in room 3, called Beth, the youth center director. "Kevin's picking on the new girl again." Derek sighed and headed toward the room where 12-year-old Kevin was taunting a quiet girl who'd recently moved to town. 6 months ago, Derek would have joined in or ignored it completely. Now he saw himself in Kevin's behavior, and it made his stomach turn. "Kevin, can I talk to you for a minute?" Derek said, putting his hand gently on the boy's shoulder. Kevin looked up defiantly. "She's weird, Derek. She doesn't talk to anybody and she dresses funny." "I used to think like that too," Derek said, leading Kevin away from the other children. "I thought anyone who was different deserved to be picked on." "You want to know where that got me?" Kevin shrugged, but Derek could see he was listening. "It got me in trouble with some people who taught me that being different isn't bad. Being mean is bad. That girl isn't hurting anybody by being quiet or dressing different, but you're hurting her by being cruel." Derek had learned this lesson from Jake, who'd spent hours talking to him about anger, insecurity, and the difference between strength and cruelty. The conversations had been uncomfortable, but they'd changed something fundamental in Derek's worldview. By the end of the day, Kevin was showing the new girl how to use the art supplies, and Derek felt the same pride that Tyler and Chase were learning to recognize. The real test came on a Friday evening in November, 3 months after the incident at Murphy's Diner. Luna was sitting in her usual booth, enjoying her weekly chocolate chip pancakes when Tyler, Chase, and Derek walked through the front door. They hadn't planned to come to the diner together, but they'd all been thinking the same thing. It was time to face the place where they'd made their worst mistake. Jenny noticed them first and tensed up, but Jake, who was sitting at the counter having coffee, gave her a reassuring nod. These weren't the same boys who'd terrorized customers months earlier. Tyler approached Luna's table first, his hands shaking slightly. "Luna, could we sit with you for a minute?" Luna looked up from her pancakes and smiled. "Of course. I was hoping you would come back here someday." The three boys slid into the booth across from her, and Tyler pulled out a carefully folded piece of paper. "We wrote you a letter," he said quietly. "All of us together. We wanted to say some things properly." Luna took the letter and read it slowly, her lips moving slightly as she worked through the words. It was a real apology, not just sorry we got caught, but a genuine acknowledgement of the pain they'd caused and a promise to be better people. When she finished reading, Luna looked up at them with tears in her eyes. But they were happy tears. "This is the nicest letter anyone's ever given me," she said. "I forgive you. I forgave you a long time ago." Tyler wiped his own eyes, not caring who saw. "We don't deserve your forgiveness, but we're grateful for it." "Everyone deserves forgiveness," Luna said simply. "That's what my mom always taught me." Jake watched from the counter as the four young people talked quietly in the corner booth. Luna was telling them about her week at the library and the community center. The boys were listening with genuine interest, asking questions about her life and her dreams. It was then that Jake realized his work was truly done. These boys had learned what it meant to be decent human beings. More importantly, they'd learned why it mattered. 6 months later, Tyler was accepted to the state university with a major in special education. Chase had started a book club at the library for people with disabilities. Derek was training to become a youth counselor, working with at-risk kids who reminded him of his former self, and Luna still came to Murphy's Diner every Friday for chocolate chip pancakes. But now she was never alone. Sometimes Tyler joined her before heading to his weekend job at the community center. Sometimes Chase brought new audiobooks to share with her. Sometimes Derek stopped by to tell her about the kids he was helping at the youth center. The road guardians still met at their clubhouse every week, but they talked less about justice and more about the positive changes they saw in their community. Jake had framed a photo of Luna smiling at her birthday party, surrounded by her new friends, including 3 young men who'd learned that true strength came from protecting others, not hurting them. Murphy's Diner had become something more than just a restaurant. It was a symbol of second chances and the power of community to create change. Jenny had been promoted to assistant manager, and she'd instituted a policy that no customer would ever face harassment alone again. But the most important change was in Luna herself. She'd always been kind and forgiving, but now she walked with a confidence that came from knowing she was protected and valued by her community. She'd learned that standing up for herself was possible, and that there were people who would stand up for her when she couldn't. On a warm Friday evening in spring, Luna sat in her favorite booth, sharing chocolate chip pancakes with Tyler, Chase, and Derek, while Jake and several other road guardians occupied nearby tables. The sound of laughter filled the air, and Murphy's Diner buzzed with the comfortable energy of a place where everyone belonged. It was, Luna thought as she watched her friends argue playfully over who got the last pancake, exactly how the world should be.